Welcome and keyless lie specters to another awesome episode of the Mass Effect Lorecast. We have a very heavy episode today, though, but before we get into that, joining me as always is my co-host Genesis. Genesis, how are you doing?
I'm doing really good. It's been a little bit hectic, but today is exciting, and then I'm really excited for Saturday. I really am this year.
Oh, yeah. You're going to a gaming convention, right?
Yeah, the Portland Retro Gaming Expo. A lot of big names are showing up this year, and I'm excited to meet and greet.
Yes, including some Mass Effect voice actors.
Yes, the voice actor for Sovereign is going to be there, and Suvi from Andromeda.
Man, that's awesome. All right. Well, we might have an update maybe later on how that goes. But for now, like I mentioned, we have a very heavy episode today covering a lot of topics that might make you feel uneasy. Certainly some stuff you would not want your young children to hear. For example, we'll just do a blanket kind of, viewer discretion advised warning here. We're going to be talking about things like suicide. We're going to be talking about things like addiction. We're going to be talking about things that are very heavy in terms of mental health and emotional abuse. So take that as it is. If you got kids in the car, maybe listen to this episode a little bit later. You got anything else to add to that, Genesis?
No, I think you hit the marks on that one. It's definitely a very heavy episode, but we won't dwell too much on some of the things. But the addiction one, I feel like we're going to have a lot to talk about because it is one of the big things that he goes through.
Yes. So as we left it, he being Paul Grayson, Paul told the Illusive man to basically go fork himself, and that his daughter, and I say daughter loosely, but, daughter, Jillian Grayson, she was on that deep space expedition with the Quarians, presumably safe from Cerberus's grasp. And, oh, by the way, Timmy boy, if you try to come after me, Kaylee Sanders, or Jillian, I will go to the Alliance with everything that I know.
It's a pretty big threat.
It's a hell of a threat.
They can definitely do a lot of damage there.
Hell of a threat for and to threaten the Illusive man, nevertheless. Your video, by the way, has paused on a very flattering image of you, Genesis. You look like you just hit some of that Marietta Green, which is what my Ohio friends might know it as, or perhaps some jazz cabbage. Perhaps some red sand. Are you doing your own red sand over there? That's kind of how it looked.
Maybe not. I am not at liberty to say right now.
Oh my God. I was silent. Okay, now I see my audio levels coming through. We'll fix that in post-production. Anyway, like I was saying, 3 years have passed since the end of Mass Effect Ascension. That's where we left off things when we last talked about Paul. And now almost 3 years have passed, so we are now in about 2186. So this is just before the events of Mass Effect 3 take place. For reference, the first part of Grayson's story, Mass Effect Ascension, took place just a couple months after the Battle of the Citadel in Mass Effect 1. So, almost 3 years have passed, and that means that Paul has been in hiding and deep cover, if you want to call it that. Anyone listening along want to guess where he goes? All right. So now that you've had your guesses, I will spoil it for you. Omega, which I always felt like was a giant mistake. But for Paul, he knows that Omega is kind of like the one confirmed place of civilization in the Milky Way where Cerberus and the Illusive Man don't have a foothold. They're actively deterred, in fact. Genesis, what did you think of Paul's decision to hide out on Omega?
It's a little bit of a comfort place for him because it's a layout he knows. He feels it's a little bit of a home court advantage. You know, he doesn't really have a home to go back to. And it's not like he can go to the Ascension program and stay there at Grissom Academy. He needs somewhere that he can deem himself safe. So I understand why he chose Omega rather than like some little backwater planet where nobody's going to know him, where he'd have to truly pick up from scratch and start again. At least on Omega, he's already made some contacts.
Yeah, and I think maybe his thought process was going along the lines of, I can hide in a crowd. Now, the way this is a pretty telling excerpt from the book, it says, even if they knew Grayson was hiding here, it wouldn't be easy to get to him. And they are referencing specifically how unpopular Cerberus is on Omega, being that Cerberus is this human supremacist organization. Omega is the, haven for unsavory aliens and gangs and a lot of Batarians. And yeah, so we know that Cerberus is unpopular on Omega. And we should also keep in mind that the events of the Omega DLC have not yet happened. But to me, again, this seems like Paul should assume that the Illusive Man has some level of access everywhere, including Omega. Also, if you're on the run, why go to one of the largest stations in the galaxy where you might easily stand out? Because there are humans on Omega, but there's far more aliens.
True, but it could also be that he just wants to be another human that's going to be avoided and ignored and blend into the crowd that's there.
Okay, fair. But, like you mentioned, he has to support himself.
Exactly. He needs money. He needs work. He has to get it from somewhere. And he already had made several non-Cerberus contacts before he had to leave previously.
Right. And, he has these skills that he developed during his time as Cerberus operative, specifically a field agent. And we know that these would make working as a mercenary much easier. And that's also, that thought runs through his mind as well, that he will be able to finish jobs and feed himself just fine, where he also feels like it's dingy and this unsavory place that Cerberus is not going to be there. But again, if you're the Illusive Man, I think Omega might be one of my first guesses for where he was. But that's in my opinion his first mistake that he makes while being on the run. The second is he changes his name. Now that might sound like a good idea, right? But he chooses, okay, are you ready for this? He chooses Paul Johnson. Why? Dude, come on. That might work on a Vorcha, but these are humans after you. Johnson, Paul Johnson, really?
Yeah, that's definitely not the smartest one to go with. Johnson is an extremely common last name, yes, but sticking with Paul is not the smartest idea. If you really wanted to stick with Paul so that way you didn't get confused by what people were calling you, make your last name Paulson. Change your first name, change your middle name, make your last name Paulson. Because a lot of people will go by their last name.
Yeah, I guess. But yeah, keeping it as Paul is man, you're flirting. You're skating on thin ice. I don't know why you would do that. Maybe the joke here is that Johnson was an extremely common name on Earth around our current time. However, so far in the future, it has become obscure.
Either that or it is kind of a taunt. to the elusive man, yeah, dude, go ahead. Come after me. You know exactly what I'll do.
Okay. So you're thinking maybe he purposefully tried not to hide that bad?
It's a thought. I can't really support it with anything,
Okay.
but it's a thought that popped into my head.
So speaking of his work, let's talk about Paul's new employer. He signs up to work as one of Arya's mercenaries. So the guy who was trained to hate aliens for like more than a decade is now working for arguably the most badass one.
I mean, if you're gonna flip sides, go big or go home, I guess.
I guess he was thinking, okay, I gotta hide and work for someone who I know that like is one of the few beings in the in the Milky Way that the Illusive Man would think twice about wronging.
Yeah, that's also a very valid point because we know that Arya and the Elusive Man definitely have a history, but I think that they try to keep away from each other because of that.
Right. And they do end up actually talking to each other during this book. It's a little bit later though, and it is on one of these jobs for Arya that Paul runs into an old foe. His addiction to red sand. He has been clean since he went into hiding almost 3 years ago, but Arya has Grayson and his crew attack a Talon's warehouse. Now, Arya says that they have been selling the drug, red sand, but the problem is that they haven't been giving her a cut of the cash. So Grayson and the squad that he's commanding, they get the red sand, and then there's this interesting internal conflict that Grayson goes through. Do I take the sand directly back to to Afterlife? Or do I stash it somewhere safer? So he's rationalizing this in his head as, well, there's plenty of junkies and gangs surrounding the streets of Omega immediately outside of Afterlife. Afterlife would be a huge target because it's Arya's central command post. And he ultimately tells his crew, let's stash it at my apartment and we'll arrange a pickup tomorrow.
Talk about skirting the line of danger.
Yeah, well, to me, and I think anyone else who has struggled with addiction before, you can see what's really going on here. Maybe I'm being a bit cynical. What do you think?
No, I actually agree with you on this one. He has his rationalizations, but this is his addict brain speaking. It's telling him that he can manage having it in his house, no problem. But knowing that the temptation is there, it's going to be a huge temptation. And the addict brain is always pushing at that button.
Yeah, it is. And it's like, why even flirt with that? You know what I mean? Find somewhere else to stash it if you don't want to take it back to Afterlife. But I think he's like subconsciously scheming, if that makes sense. That's the addict brain that you're talking about. And yeah, just keeping it in your apartment, like, dude, you're setting yourself up for failure here. But I guess that's not like surprising considering his history of self-destructive behavior.
Yeah, it fits right in line with it. And I really do think that this was a very good moment in the book from reading it and knowing what that internal conversation is like.
Right. That's just one of so many different internal conversations that we get for Paul that we don't get a lot for other characters, a little bit for Kaylee, but we get a lot of internal dialogue for Paul, specifically about the addiction. Now, I want to take a step back and let's also talk about romance. Grayson is sleeping with one of his squad mates named Lizelle, which, by the way, when I was listening to this on audiobook, I kept hearing Lizelle, and I kept thinking about Baldur's Gate.
Yeah, no, Githyanki and Asari don't really have a whole lot in common, though. So easy to separate that.
I don't think they'd like each other. Githyanki are a lot more like Vorcha.
Yes. And I do not think that Lizelle would like the Asari all that much at all.
No. Anyway, so Lizelle is an Asari who also happens to be Arya's daughter.
But nobody knows this information.
Oh, yeah. No one knows that the human is sleeping with Arya's daughter, which, by the way, if you're like, whoa, dude, I didn't even know Arya had kids. Yeah, no one knows at this point in the lore until this book comes out. Mm-hmm. So Arya does have a daughter named Lizelle who works for her. And when they were, so basically Lizelle, did you get this vibe from Lizelle that the way the book describes her is she's kind of this like stereotypical gangster woman who is a little bit of a femme fatale?
I definitely got that from her. Very much like portraying the badass, being, the wild child, going out partying, all that. But then again, she is still in her maiden phase. And so this is the time for her to be doing stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's also this difference in maturity. So you bring up her being in the maiden phase. Paul recognizes that he's in a far different phase of his life. He's middle-aged toward, getting closer toward that senior citizen discount. And so we have this point in the book where Paul is thinking to himself, and he says, Lizelle always made him feel like a cradle robber, despite the fact that she was almost a full century older than him.
Yeah. Doesn't that sound familiar?
It does. It does sound familiar. But the thing is, so basically, he's talking about how he feels like it's wrong that he's dating Lizelle, and I'll say dating, but he's sleeping with her, really. It's not like a super domestic relationship, they're definitely just sleeping together, and it doesn't seem to be that anything.
No, they're
serious.
Not living together.
Yeah. So we have Grayson contemplating whether this relationship is creepy. Because in his own words, he considers himself a quote-unquote weathered geezer, but that Lizelle probably has more in common with his daughter. Ew.
I don't like that, especially because at this point, Jillian's
15?
13, maybe 4. Is she 15?
She was 12
3 years later, 15. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to ask the question, is it a positive or a negative reflection on Paul? Because he does see this, and he thinks of this as at least a little bit inappropriate. So he does have the conscience to recognize that it's wrong, but he's still sleeping with her.
Well, okay, so we see this with the Liara romance too a little bit, because she acts young. She is a young in Asari terms, yet she is fully adult in any galactic standards. Now, Lizelle to me acts older, and it's probably just like the lust for life, the youthful energy that is making Paul feel that he is too old.
Yeah, exactly. So, there's that point in the book where Lizelle is like, come on, Paul, let's go dance at Afterlife. You remember that? And he's like, oh, go on, I'll catch up later. And then she says, well, okay, but don't take too long, or maybe I'll be dancing with a Krogan.
Exactly. So it is like the flirty, younger, it is the younger wife syndrome, it is the trophy wife syndrome where you've got this hot chick that you're dating, and then you're the older guy who doesn't really want to go out to party, but you love the idea of her going out and having fun and having that youthful energy. So no, I don't see anything wrong with this.
Yeah, I see something wrong with it, but only because Paul does. So okay. Lizelle this is clearly consensual in the book. However, because Paul feels icky about it, and because he brings up Lizelle in the same thought as his daughter, if I were Paul's friend, I'd be like, look, dude, I hear what you just said, and you got to take a long, hard look in the mirror and ask yourself if you're doing the right thing.
Yeah. Or if you just need to get over yourself and have fun with the, 150-year-old Asari.
A spry 150. So, okay, so kind of side tangential to that, and I think you'll know where I'm going when I say side tangential. Paul is also keeping in constant contact with Kaylee Sanders. And we learn that he has video called her once every couple of weeks for the past 3 years. But the most recent time, that same night that they stash the red sand in Paul's apartment, Kaylee notices that Paul is lean, he's gaunt, disheveled, and he's on edge.
Yeah, he's upset about something. Maybe it's the thousands of credits worth of red sand underneath his bed at the time. But it's nice to know that they've kept in touch. I do like this, that they've continued this relationship that we don't get to see, but at least we know that they've kept this up. So having Kaylee reintroduced doesn't feel like it's completely out of nowhere.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, his primary motivating factor for keeping in touch with Kaylee is that Kaylee's still working at the Grissom Academy. So she's still working with these biotically talented kids. Even though Jillian is no longer there, Jillian was the link that kept Paul and Kaylee like that. That's why they know each other. So he is keeping in touch with Kaylee because Kaylee is presumably keeping in touch with Hindel Mitra as well as Jillian while they're on that expedition with the Quarians. And he basically wants updates secondhand about how his daughter's doing. And so I found this interesting that Kaylee noticed on the video call, it says she was relieved to see his pupils and teeth, which were white, and that she notices there is no rosy pink hue. So, in other words, there was no indication that he started using red sand again.
Right. No vampirism. No glowing red eyes. No shiny, hued teeth. Which was just so weird that the teeth also start to glow.
Yeah, pink too. I gotta pause real quick and mention something that Cat Table Abby, is it Cat Table or Catable? Catable Abby says in chat here, well, Kaylee Sanders would know something about sleeping with someone who could be her kid.
We are not. Oh gosh. Okay. So Sam wants to bring this line up because of the worst line that I have read in a book in a long time.
Drum roll, please.
The elusive man told me to pump her for information, so I decided to pump her at every opportunity I got.
Quote, Jiro from Mass Effect Ascension, who is another Cerberus operative in deep cover, acting as a scientist in the Grissom Academy, working alongside Kaylee Sanders. She doesn't know he's a Cerberus operative. She's sleeping with him. He's much younger, and I guess quite a stud. So,
no, he's not maybe a stud in the looks department, but he's
right.
Also a jackrabbit who had no stamina. So, haha.
Well, A for effort. Anyway, yes, that was a real line in the book that Genesis is referencing, but also considering that she sleeps with someone who's young enough to be her kid, she can bond with Paul over sleeping with someone who is emotionally young enough to be his kid. But it doesn't take long for Jillian to come up in this conversation. And that's the worst segue I've ever made. But the book tells us that Paul feels conflicting emotions of longing, regret, and happiness when Jillian is brought up. He says, I'm always thinking of her. So then Paul asks whether Kaylee has heard anything from the Quarians about Jillian. She says no, and he says, it's better this way.
Yeah. And that breaks my mama heart. Like, to know that your kid is out there somewhere and you can't interact with them, you can't get a hold of them, but it's safer and better that way. Oh, that hurts.
Yeah, you can tell, like, he's barely holding back the pain there. Like, he doesn't actually think it's better that way, but he's like trying to convince himself, basically. So Kaylee tries to get Paul to visit the Grissom Academy because she notices he's sad after that part in the conversation. She wants to cheer him up, and she wants him to see the advances that they've made. But he warns her that it would not be safe for either of them if he did that. Now, that's a great point, in my opinion, because he's quite well aware, even 3 years into it, that he's still in hiding and probably will have to be for the rest of his life from Cerberus. And altruistically, he does not want to get Kaylee involved.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah. So this phone call leaves him reeling with a ton of emotions. It leaves him reconciling other emotions of guilt. He's racking his brain and remembering all the things that Cerberus did to his daughter and what he allowed them to do, the missions that he carried out for Cerberus. He starts considering whether his current work as a mercenary is any more excusable than his work for Cerberus. The way that he phrases it in his own mind is, so what if the target deserved it? Now, does that make it any less moral? You know, like as in his work as a mercenary, he's taking out other criminals, right? So what if that target deserved it as opposed to my targets at Cerberus? Maybe they didn't deserve it. Does it make my work now as a mercenary any less moral? So he's going through this identity crisis, that you could say, and he starts crying. And as anyone who has struggled with addiction knows, guilt will drive you to relapse fast. Very, very fast.
Yeah. Guilt is a big one. And almost any emotion that you were not prepared to handle, even the ones that we call the quote positive ones, if you get a really high on life moment, you're like, hey, I know how to kick this feeling up even another step. And then you can fall back into addiction. Or, you know, if you are going through physical pain or any other type of emotional pain and you know, hey, I can just numb this all away. And Grayson knows this.
This emotion in particular, the guilt, is especially powerful for pushing Grayson back toward the addiction because the guilt is part of what was driving his addiction in the first place.
The guilt over what he was contributing to Jillian and her upbringing. Yeah.
And of course, he's tempted. So after the phone call, the siren song of addiction calls to him, like the Green Goblin, but instead of a mask from across the room, it's a bag of red sand under his bed. And literally, there's this dialogue happening in his mind as if it's the addiction brain talking to him. And the addiction brain says, Cerberus will find you. It's inevitable. So why not enjoy some red sand now? And I loved the way that was written because it's so true. Like, if you've struggled with addiction, then you know, like, the stratagems that your, like, addiction in your mind will play with you. That there are these thoughts that it's like it's toying with you, and it's really fucked up. But, like, it's raw, that this writing is raw. But it's true, and I like it. And it actually makes me wonder whether or not Drew Karpyshyn has struggled with addiction himself in the past.
Either himself or he's gone to something like an Al-Anon, where it's the family of addicted people, and or just did some really good research and got to talk to people who go through something like this. But yeah, no, that sounds like addiction brain.
Yeah, it does. It does. The constant scheming, the pseudo logic that it offers you, trying to get you to tempt you to take a dust up, as they would say with red sand. But here's the interesting thing, where we see Grayson has truly changed. He gathers the willpower to reject this temptation. That is not an easy feat. When you're already feeling guilty, you're crying, and your addict brain is trying to entice you, basically saying that all hope is lost for the future anyway. Why not just take a hit now? It takes...
And your drug of choice is right there, physically right next to you.
Yeah. Yeah, it takes, like, superhuman willpower to reject that temptation, but he does. And there are two main motivators. He remembers that his commitment to being a better man is for Jillian, even though she's not here. So in some ways, Jillian is his anti-drug.
Mm-hmm.
And he also knows, number two, this is the second reason, he knows that being on the run from Cerberus, any given second could be his last. That's what it says in the book. He knows any given second could be his last. So he needs to stay alert. He needs to stay sober. He needs to keep his wits about him. But ironically, I think the second reason, I think this kind of stress might actually push him closer to relapse.
Definitely, because for a lot of people, if they're like, well, I could die tomorrow anyways, might as well be high while I'm doing it. You know, that's also very much an addict brain of, if I'm going to die soon anyways, might as well go out in style. But it's also the other motivator of being Jillian. Children can be a huge motivator to stay sober. They can also be part of the reason that you relapse. So it's interesting that his two key motivations for staying sober could also very quickly be the key motivators to relapse.
Right. I think we're also seeing at this point that his main motivators are external. They're not internal. Yeah. They're external. So that changes throughout the story. We'll get into that. But there is kind of this sad moment of clarity that he comes to when he's talking himself out of the temptation. And he says, well, I'm not having physical cravings anymore anyway. It's been so long since I had red sand, you know. And then he thinks to himself, quote, it was never really about the physical cravings, was it? Dusting takes away the pain, makes things bearable. That one cuts you deep.
Yeah, it does. Because for a lot of the things that me myself have gone through and my history with addiction, it has been the physical craving or even the habit of it, the ritual of doing the thing the exact same way every time, and just the familiarity of it. And breaking that level of physical addiction was the very hardest part. Staying sober beyond that has been fairly easy. But I don't think it's because I wasn't using it to take away a pain. And his addiction sounds like he was using it to take away pain.
He was self-medicating.
And that's a lot harder. Yeah.
He was self-medicating for sure. And in his position, being this, you know, wet work operative for Cerberus, it's not exactly like he can come clean and tell everything to a counselor, right?
Oh, yeah. I don't think that there's a whole lot of therapy available on Omega.
Well, or not even on Omega, but when he was working for Cerberus, what therapy is he going to... He can't go to an external counselor not working for Cerberus and disclose everything about what he's done. He also can't tell everything to a Cerberus-sponsored counselor because you know that report's going straight back to the Illusive Man.
Yeah. You would have to walk a very thin line, and walking a thin line in therapy is not how you're ever going to heal anything.
No, you need to feel safe, first and foremost. Yukon in chat says maybe he needed Kelly Chambers. Arguable. Kelly would definitely feel like she could fix him, though.
Kelly could also feed the next portion of where he leads to.
Yeah. So he comes to this second point of clarity during this internal monologue, and it says that he, Paul, knew the kind of man he wanted to be, but part of him wouldn't let him forget the man that he once was. That's hard. That's really hard because he's, like I brought up guilt before, he has this ongoing struggle with guilt.
Mm-hmm. And he knows that he is going to hold all of that and he can never truly let go of the man he was before, but only hope to continue to strive forward. But he can't let go of who he was.
Exactly. So this internal struggle, his demons inside his head, is so integral to Paul's entire story arc, and we see those demons grow literally and figuratively, but we will get to that after the mid-break. So let's go over to the mid-break, and hold on. Here's my mid-break button. Wait a second. Oh, man. It's not here. Hold on. Okay, I got it. Mid-break. Let's go.
We have beef, we have bacon, we have beer. The foods of my people.
Young men have funny ideas of what Asari are like. I blame the extranet and computer games.
Rex? Shepherd. Grunt? Shepherd. Rex? Grunt?
All right, here we are in the middle of the show where we read out your 5-star reviews. We don't have any new ones from Apple Podcasts this week, but we do have a couple of comments that I want to highlight from our YouTube and Spotify channels. On Spotify, Regretted Coin 22 says, y'all are doing a fantastic job. I need to do my yearly playthrough this year, going on year 10 of an entire playthrough of the trilogy. I'm curious to see if y'all ever cover any of the weapon and armor megacorps. Little fun fact, I ran a homebrew campaign with my own rule set in the Mass Effect universe before the events on Eden Prime. Well, that's awesome. Genesis and I actually were part of a homebrew Mass Effect 5e campaign. That one was set before Shepard is resurrected, right?
Yeah, I think that was the timeline.
In the 2 years, yeah, in that timeline. And we were on Omega a lot. So, yeah, love the Mass Effect homebrew. And I don't think that we've ever gone into extreme depth about like Han Kadar, Saronis applications. We haven't gone into a lot of depth there, but a lot of those companies I've looked into, and sad to say that there's just not a lot of lore about them besides the fact that, hey, they make this armor set. They make this armor set. What's the manufacturer of Phoenix armor? I can't remember. Is it
I
Serta?
don't remember. It might be Serta.
Well, anyway, I know that they were heavily focused on medical applications, but yeah, there's just not a lot of lore there. So if you find one where you think that there's a decent amount of lore that we should dig into, definitely let us know. But thank you for that comment, Regretted Coin 22. And there are comments on Spotify now, so we read them out occasionally. Just go to our most recent episode. You can comment there if you want to get your words read on the air. Genesis, you want to read this comment that we got on YouTube?
Yeah. The Melvic 3K, laughing my ass off. Love the intro. Sam and Jen, the shades are fire. Loved the glasses and shades combo. Double visors for the win. Sam, you may really have a career for voice acting. That was really good. At some point, y'all might need the Kawashi visors from the game. That would be awesome.
That would be. I would love that. I don't know if does the BioWare gear store sell that? Does anyone sell the Kawashi visor? I'd get it.
Yeah. If it was life size and I could actually wear it, I would get it.
Yeah. Well, thank you, the Melvic. I think Genesis and I have actually done some voice acting for the Avengers audio drama. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. And that was, of course, referencing our intro from last week. So, all right, Genesis, I've got a voice line for you, and I think that this one is a real stumper. I don't know if you're going to get it. We'll see. All right, you ready?
Right.
All right.
Yep.
Here we go.
One of my crews found him, frozen stiff on board a derelict vessel.
I'll play it one more time.
One of my crews found him, frozen stiff on board a derelict vessel.
So tell me which character said this in which game at which part?
It sounded Mass Effect 1. Frozen solid on a derelict vessel. gosh. Okay. You really did.
I've undone
I can't
myself.
even tell who you have.
Don't look at the Twitch chat because people are guessing who it is.
Yeah, no Twitch chat. So it's Mass Effect 1, a derelict vessel, the frozen body, and it is the crew. I honestly cannot think of one where the body's frozen, other than stuff that has to do with like Novaria. And Novaria is all about the Rachni. So I don't know.
All right.
I'm going to say
I've done
full
it.
stump.
I've done it. I've stumped Genesis. It's Rear Admiral Kahoku talking with Shepard about that side quest that Kahoku sends you on. I believe you meet him in the Citadel Tower.
Okay, definitely know Kahoku and all of his missions, but what the heck does the frozen body have to do with anything?
Kahoku's investigating the same cell that abducted his soldiers. Or his son's team, as Yukon corrects me here in chat and says. So Shepard's not the only one doing some investigating. Kahoku is too, and eventually that leads to Kahoku's death. So back then when Cerberus was just a Alliance black cell, I think that's how they described it, right? And then it was retconned and said, oh, well, that was just one Cerberus cell. All right. Well, I stumped Genesis finally. All right, we don't have any new patrons to shout out, but we will shout out our Tier 5 patrons as we do every week. Butts. Unfortunate Benefactor, William, Superfly 440, Retrobot, Lieutenant Tocino, Kira C, and Ed Boy. Thank you all so much for your support.
After time adrift among open stars, along tides of light and through shoals of dust, I will return to where I began.
Solarian reproduction different, very little sex drive. If intended to try human, would try you. Ow, my pancreas.
All right, here we are back in the second half of the show. And Genesis, bad news for Paul Grayson. He's not as hidden as he thought. And it's because Kai Lang has been spying on him. Kai Lang, that motherforker. He knows that Paul is on Omega, and the Illusive Man personally asked Kai Lang to bring him back alive so that Paul can be used for Reaper Tech research.
Which is crazy. I mean, okay, introducing Kai Lang here and having him know where Paul is, okay, but the fact that Illusive Man wants to do testing on a human,
It's
that
vindictive.
to me is like, yeah.
Yeah,
That's definitely what it is.
he's acting like a spurned little bitch. Is what he's doing. He's, you don't spurn me, I'll make you pay. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this is clear that Paul's threat to the Illusive Man never forgot about and took it personally. That's how big
And
the
held
ego
on
is
to it
on
for
this guy.
3 years.
Yeah, that's how big and fragile the ego is on this guy. So that night of the call with Kaylee, after turning in the quest, as you could say, turning in the quest with Arya, Paul goes home, starts feeling lonely, and then tempted by the red sand, and he calls over Lizelle, quote unquote, to replace one addiction with another. So, pretty clear terms, he's just using her for sex.
Yeah. And it's so real. It really is.
Yeah, he has a rebound girl, but not from a previous relationship, from a relationship with Red Sand.
Mm-hmm. Replacing one addiction with a different one is something that happens all the time. Some people will replace drug addiction with a methadone addiction that's supposed to help you curtail your original addiction. Others will use exercise and just be like, oh, but I'm being super healthy now. I'm no longer overeating. I'm no longer anorexic or bulimic or doing things that are harmful to my body. See, I'm working out. That's even better for me, right? But there's still the addiction. you can also very easily use sex as an addiction. And there are a lot of replacements for the synthetic emotions that illegal drugs can cause in very, quote, legal ways.
Yeah. And I love this writing because it's so messy. It's super messy. Paul is not like this role model that anyone really should aspire to be at this point, anyway. And it's raw. You know, this isn't right, but this is how people act. This is real.
I like that. It's not right, but it's real.
Yeah. And I bring up Lizelle here because she is over at his place in bed with him when Kai Lang and a squad of Cerberus mercs break in. Now there's a short fight, but Grayson and Lizelle ultimately get knocked out by stun guns or stun rounds, tranquilizer darts, I think they are, right, in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're knocked out, and so Kai Lang could just pick up Grayson and take his body and leave, but in addition, he decides to slit Lizelle's throat and watch her bleed out.
That was really hard to read, the cold-blooded murder that Kai Lang was able to just do without any remorse or regret.
And it talks about in the book how Lizelle is naked when Kai Lang slits her throat, and he watches her bleed out, and he just thinks to himself, disgusting. And it's like, wow, this guy is a psychopath. Like, oh my God. And it just makes that Renegade Interrupt at the end of Mass Effect 3 even more satisfying. So, but it does go to show you that Kai Lang is kind of like the true believer of the human supremacist group in Cerberus. Like, he really buys into that BS. And then the Cerberus squad carries Grayson off to that shuttle off of Omega.
Yeah. And, you know, I always try to find the good in people. Give me the silver lining. Give me the I am the forever optimist. I intentionally, the shades that we were talking about in the mid-break, they are pink. They are my rose-colored glasses because that's the way that I prefer to see the world. I can't find anything redeeming about Kai Lang at all.
Yeah. Yeah, he really has been like, he's always written to be the foil. However, in the book, he's less of an just warrantless edgelord. You know what I mean? He's less of a Redditor, and he's more of just like an actual psychopathic killer. Whereas I feel like in the game in Mass Effect 3, we didn't get the book lore there, so we just are like, who's this, clown? You know what I mean?
Right. I don't understand why I'm supposed to hate this guy and why Anderson really hates him and why he's so much of a badass, and this is the first time that we're seeing him without having this back lore.
Yeah. So we fast forward a bit because at this point in the book, it's kind of going over to different stories. Like you mentioned, Anderson. It's going over to talk about Anderson's point of view in the story, talk about Kaylee's point of view in the story, talking about other parts of the story that are progressing. But the next part we get from Grayson's story is that he wakes up and he is strapped to an operating chair. He's not able to move or speak, and the Illusive Man is there giving this very villain-esque monologue about what's going to happen to him. This is terrifying.
Extremely terrifying, and it is we know the Illusive Man is a bad guy, we know, but he's still very charismatic in the games. Like, you like him in a certain way. But in this scene here where he's describing what he is going to have done to Grayson, it's like, oh yeah, I kind of sometimes forget that you are truly an evil, evil man.
Yes. Yeah, it is easy to forget because consistently in the games when he's on screen, he always has the facade up. This is off broadcast, right? This is a private conversation that he knows that it's not ever going to get out because it's just him, some scientists, and his prisoner right there. And ironically, so here, I'll just get into it. The Illusive Man describes that he's going to be injecting Grayson with the Reaper nanites, and that they are these self-replicating machines that will overtake Grayson's nervous system and body. The descriptions here are pretty gruesome, but I'll leave it at the point when tubes are inserted into Grayson's skull and he is like not given anesthetic, right? I think it says in the book that he's aware for all of this.
Yeah. Yeah. Grayson is aware for a lot of bad things that happened to him.
Yeah. So notwithstanding the obvious trauma that would come from being awake and aware for all of that, and being aware that you are going to lose your autonomy entirely. Like, you will not have autonomy. And it's not just that you will be catatonic. It's not just that you will be, stuck in one place. It's that there are going to be self-replicating machines taking over your body. And you're going to watch as they live your life. This was horrific. And ironically reminded me that although he claims to put humanity first, there is perhaps no one with less humanity in Cerberus than the Illusive Man.
Ooh, I like the way that you put that.
Snaps.
Yeah. I'll give you snaps on that one.
Because he's standing in front of a powerless man, strapped to an operating chair, which, by the way, remember, he always contested that he didn't want to experiment on human beings, right? Or if he did, then it was necessary for their advancement. Here, there is such anger in the way that the Illusive Man is describing this. And by the way, you don't have to shout at someone to show you're angry, but there's such anger behind the way he's describing it that it's personal. You can tell this is personal.
Yeah. I mean, Grayson is one of the few people that was able to evade the Illusive Man, has enough dirt to truly hurt him. And, he didn't want that. The Illusive Man had to find him in order to keep everything that he has. His ego would not allow Grayson to live.
Yeah. So, after the surgery, he wakes up in a cell and he's starving, he's dehydrated, and he's kind of just gobbling up whatever food, horrible looking food, and water are left for him. This transpires over the next few days where he begins hearing these faint, unintelligible whispers. The first signs of indoctrination, as we know. And he's fighting these voices relentlessly inside his head. And here's where I think his battle with addiction actually helped him prepare his willpower here. Because the demons are not metaphorical anymore.
Right. He's used to a little voice in his head going, hey, why don't you go do this? Don't you want this? You should listen to me. I know I'm right. You should go touch the red sand. And in this one, he can't tell exactly what these voices are saying to him, but he can hold off longer because he knows how to fight the voices in his head.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So he has been fighting for control of his life for so long that at some level, I think this is not new to Grayson. Now, the format and the medium through which it's happening and the intensity, those are all new, and it's terrifying. So there's this kind of tug and war back and forth over who has more control over Grayson's mind and how far is the indoctrination progressing. But ultimately, the progress is plateauing. And that's when the Illusive Man gets pissed off because he's wanting this to progress faster. And so the Illusive Man decides that he's going to forcibly dose Paul Grayson with red sand. This is so fucked up.
beyond fucked up. I mean, forced breaking of forced breaking of sobriety. That is just one of the most dehumanizing things that you can do to somebody. Like, I cannot believe that the Illusive Man went this far, but also the fact that he doesn't do it himself. He makes Kai Lang walk into the room and do it. I was just like, oh, I hate the both of you so much.
It's like dehumanizing is the perfect word for it. That you just said, dehumanizing, because he's treating Paul worse than most of us would treat an animal. Like, think about that. He's treating Paul Grayson worse than most of us treat our dogs, our cats. He's treating him worse than, like, cosmetic companies treat their animals they experiment on. This is, like, so messed up. And the way that the Illusive Man can justify it is because he's seeking how to understand how to control the indoctrinated. It's all for the ego of one man. Like, that's what this is. And so the drug breaks Paul's resistance, of course, allowing the Reapers to seize control of his mind and his body. And it's throughout these sequences that I think we get some of the most visceral depictions of language of what indoctrination is like for the person who is indoctrinated. The most gruesome, colorful descriptions of what it's like to be inside. And so there's this excerpt in the book that says, he was once again trapped inside himself. He could see and hear everything acutely. But though he was fully aware of his surroundings, it was all somehow distant, as if it was filtered before being processed.
Those words take a second to sink in, and then you realize how terrifying that must be.
Right. You can't run from that.
No.
And it scares Grayson, which the emotional response itself, Grayson thinks, okay, maybe this is giving me a little bit of more control over my body because I feel like I'm more in control when I had that intense emotional response. And so he tries to summon those at will. But as he pushed back against the Reapers, he felt them push back against him. So there is this tug of war happening, and imagine actively battling some other entity for control of your body while you can still see and hear everything.
Yeah. That is something that, unfortunately, many, many people can relate to. Being drugged or too intoxicated to make your own decisions, or being so gripped by terror that you can process everything going on around you, but not being able to react to it. Yeah, there's actually a lot of us that know how this feels.
It's like the embodiment of powerlessness.
Mm-hmm.
Having no power at all, even of your own body. And now, with the indoctrination starting to take hold, the Illusive Man says that, well, now I'm concerned that Grayson could become too dangerous. Too dangerous to control anyway. So the Illusive Man orders his team to kill Grayson in 3 days. I'm done playing with you. Now
I built you up.
Yep.
I'm starting to test your limits, and now I think you might be too dangerous. So we'll kill you in a few days, but I want to see how much I can really push you.
Yeah. That for me, this felt like the Illusive Man's arguable whether it was primary or secondary, but regardless, a main goal for the Illusive Man in doing this to Paul was to break him. It wasn't enough to kill Paul. He wanted him to suffer. He wanted to break him, and he wanted Paul to be completely aware of it the whole time.
Oh, yeah. Because Kai Lang could have killed Grayson way easier and way quicker. And I think Kai Lang even says that in the book, that killing Grayson would have been a simple task, and I would have not had to be on Omega for as long as he was. But no, the Illusive Man wanted to see him break.
Yeah.
Oh, I also wanted to point out that the full indoctrination actually takes a bit of time. While Grayson is under a second red sand indoctrination period, the Illusive Man has the doctors implant him with a device that will allow remote concentrated red sand delivery straight into Grayson's bloodstream. This second dose starts to ramp up the physical effects of the nanites. We see stretched skin. His biotic abilities start to appear and get stronger. And the Reaper tech itself is becoming more visible.
He starts losing his hair too, right? I think it mentioned he was losing his hair. If you look at the cover of Mass Effect Retribution, the guy who's kind of glowing in red light with like tubes and piping coming off of him, that we're led to believe that that's what Grayson looked like during this part. But so there is some horrific things happening to him. Again, he's completely aware of all of it while it's happening. But there is good news. Remember that threat that Paul made to the Illusive Man? Come after me, Kaylee or Jillian, and I'll tell the Alliance everything I know. Well, he made good on that. Before getting abducted by Kai Lang, he sent everything, and I mean everything, to Kaylee on his terminal in his bedroom. He was able to send it off. So back to horrible experiment time. Hours after that forced red sand injection, a Turian strike team attacks the station. Now, I know that we are skipping some stuff here. There's a ton of details that are not explicitly Paul related, so we'll get to them in another episode. But as far as Paul goes, you know, basically this is before that 3-day window where they had a deadline to kill Grayson. In fact, the Illusive Man and some guards are walking to kill Grayson, right? And the Turian strike team hits the station, the Cerberus station where they are. In the chaos, Kai Lang actually helps the Illusive Man escape, and Grayson survives. Or what little is left of Grayson, anyway. So the Turians find Grayson, but they don't realize he's actively being manipulated and that he's indoctrinated. They just think that he's like some horrific experiment that Cerberus, like this poor man, you know what I mean? So the Reapers are literally controlling Grayson's mouth at this point and conning the Turians for him. And there is nothing that Grayson can do. There is no autonomy here whatsoever. But again, completely aware.
Yeah, the lies spill from Grayson's mouth very easily. And not because it's Grayson doing this, but because the Reapers already know how to manipulate the Turians.
Right. Exactly. That's the terrifying part. The indoctrinated essence that is taking control of Grayson has the collective knowledge of the Reapers. That's scary. And that's something new that we find out in this description of how indoctrination works. So basically, the hosts who are being indoctrinated have a wealth of knowledge and sheer malice.
Yeah, but I don't think it's not as easy for like Grayson to access Reaper knowledge as it is for the Reapers to access Grayson knowledge.
Yeah, it's a one-way road, kind of. And here's the other horrifying thing about Paul's indoctrination. It comes in waves, it seems. So there's moments of total clarity where he can partially or fully control his body. But those waves are increasing in strength and frequency, and it's leaving less and less of Paul intact and in control.
Yeah. It's so difficult to read through when you can almost feel the relief and the joy of, I moved my own hand. And that is making him feel things and like, oh, maybe if I can feel more, I'll be able to take more control. And then another wave of Reaper indoctrination comes through and like, nope, I am taking direct control.
And you start to understand why it is in those final moments in Mass Effect 1 and Mass Effect 3 that if you can break through the Reaper's hold on Saren and the Illusive Man, the final act of defiance that they show is to kill themselves. Because it is them reasserting power over the last vestige of power that they might hold, that they are resisting the Reapers, and the only way they can do that is to kill themselves. Yeah. Not like the Reapers care.
No, the Reapers don't care if the vessel is damaged.
Right.
They will always find another.
Right. But those Turian soldiers, they do rescue Grayson, and they put him on the shuttle, and they leave, only for Grayson's body to be assumed direct control of, gains like superhuman fighting ability, and kills them mid-flight, and then he redirects the shuttle.
Wait, the Turian shuttle? How does Grayson know how to fly a Turian shuttle?
If I remember right, it's actually explained in the book that the Reapers are the ones who know how. And since they're in control, they just manipulate his body to do the work.
So Grayson's fingers are going to be pointing the wrong direction for a few minutes?
Grayson's going to be doing the Spock hands for a while. He's just out of habit.
Yep. And where is this shuttle taking him to?
We will get to that next week. Next time on Mass Effect Lorecast. Bong. But yeah, that takes us about halfway through Mass Effect Retribution. There's so much character development that happens with Paul's story here that we actually had originally planned to do this all in one episode. And yesterday, I think it was, I messaged you, Genesis, and I was like, hey, I'm done researching my part, and I've already got like 11 pages of notes. Like, maybe we should do this in 2 episodes.
Yeah, because that was a lot, and it's also really heavy. And so I think taking it a little break right here is good, and we can come back and talk more Grayson in part 3.
Yes.
I mean, 3 books, 3 episodes.
Yes. And, before we went live today, I had actually thought, let's just record both of them now, but it is already 8:30 p.m. And so we already have our research done for the next part. So I am going to suggest that we punt in recording to next week. And I'll do this live. This is the first time Genesis is hearing about it, so it's great. But yeah, that is all we have for this week. We will resume Paul's story, and it's the exciting conclusion to his story next week. And then after that, we've got the October patron chat, which is thankfully, because of the way the days line up, not going to be on Halloween. I was afraid for a second that it could be on Halloween, but it's not going to be on Halloween this year. It will be on the 26th, right? 25th or 26th?
25th, yeah.
All right. So we will be talking with our Tier 4 and IP patrons then. But we've got another Paul episode in the meantime. So Spectres, thank you so much for listening, and we'll be back next week. In the meantime, enjoy your autonomy. Go do something just because you can. Punch a wall. Be a Kyle. All right. See you later, Spectres.